Welcome to Valley View.
Well, thank you guys for being here. I'm really proud to return to my roots. CSUN really helped me, I think, with every aspect of my career, now leading up to KTLA and being senior producer for the morning news. So, yeah, thank you for having me. It means a lot. Again, my name is Claudine. I am class of 2010. I was actually a transfer student, so I did 2 years at community college in Valencia, College of the Canyons, and then I transferred here another 2 years before graduating. He doesn't work here anymore, but Professor Jim Hill, the best. He used to work for CNN, I think, at one point. But while I was here, my writing improved exponentially under him. And I don't know what it was, but it was in his class where it just clicked for me. I was having the hardest time because primarily when I first started, I thought I wanted to work for the LA Times. I did a summer internship with them, and that was it for me. Except for the very last day when they're like, thank you for coming in, all of that. The leader who was in charge of the summer camp, she said, she started crying, and we couldn't understand why. And I guess it was because she said this was going to be the last year that they were going to do this because the print industry is dying. And that, I was crushed because it was like, that's my whole future. You're saying, like, the LA Times at the time, it was being sold. They weren't sure what the future was going to be. And even at College of the Canyons, they had shut down the print journalism program. But the broadcast journalism program had just got funding, and they were thriving. So a lot of it was a transition of breaking away the habits of print journalism and learning how to do broadcast journalism. And I started it at COC, and I was okay at it, but it wasn't until I got here. And I think it's because Professor Hill would push me to, like, not, he wouldn't be there and criticize all of my scripts. He'd just look at it and said, you could tell this better. And he'd just pass it back to me. And then I would be challenged to figure out how to make it better. My favorite advice from him is write a script quickly, quick as you can. Put it aside. Take it home, take a look at it again, try to make it shorter. And then once you're done with that, put it away again, do it again. Make it even shorter than that. And by your third or fourth draft, you will have the perfect length for a broadcast piece. Because a lot of the times you'll start with like a 45 second. Then you'll move to like 35, 30 maybe. And then eventually you get to that sweet spot of 25. And now you have a script that is succinct. It is factually correct and sounds like it's for broadcast TV. And had he not pushed me to do that, I don't think that I would be as strong of a writer as I am now. And it's funny because I always still hear when I get caught in writing a script or writing a segment and I can't figure it out, I hear his voice and he tells me him saying that. And so then I step away for a little bit and then I go back and I just jump right in. And so definitely shout out to Professor Hill. The senior year of my time here, I interned at KTLA at the same time. I would go to KTLA from 6 in the morning until 1, and then I'd rush over here and have class in the afternoon. I did that Monday through Friday. Back then you didn't get paid for internships, so I did it for free, my own time, my own gas money, all of that stuff, because I really wanted to be a part of news, and I wanted to get that head start, and I think internship really helped me with that. When I was done and I graduated, there were no positions open at KTLA, so I did have to apply where I could at the time, and of course nobody would hire me, and at that point I said I'd give myself a month, and if after a month nobody here in LA wants to hire me, I will send out applications elsewhere, out of state, something like that. On that very last day, I get a call from KTLA saying, hey, we remember the work that you did here. We have a production assistant position opening up. Would you like to interview for it? And so I thought of it as a sign, the last day, they didn't want me to move away anywhere. So I went to that interview and I nailed it. There was no way I was leaving that building without it at that point. I interviewed with 5 different people, some of whom knew me a little bit. The others did not. They only had heard about me and the type of work that I did do as an intern. But from there, I was hired later that day. So I went into that position as a production assistant and immediately showed my stripes. Anything that anybody needed me to do, I did. Because of my education here at CSUN, I was excellent at Final Cut Pro. And so I was taking on work that normally wasn't given to the PA at the time. If a writer needed me to edit a video last minute, I would immediately volunteer. Just give me instructions, I'll do it, and I'll handle it, and I'll file it for you. And so it didn't take long for me to get promoted after that. 6 months, I was already associate producer, and they had twice as much duties as I did as a PA. And in that position, I kind of stayed there for a while because my whole thought process was this is the perfect position for me to learn and to absorb everything it is about producing. Because what you're doing is you're watching, as the show is going on, you're watching how it's all put together. And you're learning all the quirks of the different shows because every hour has a different quirk. Your talent is different. How they speak is different from other talent. And so I was absorbing all of that. In my spare time, if nobody was doing anything, I'd ask questions like, hey, why'd you do that? Or why'd you kill that story? Or in breaking news, why'd you cover it this way? And eventually when I felt like it was time for me to try something else, I went into writing for the morning news. And I did that for a few years. I had the enormous honor of writing with Eric Spillman, a legendary KTLA reporter, and we worked together in tandem for about a year and a half. I was always assigned to him because it came to a point where we understood each other and we could almost read each other's minds. So I already kind of knew his reporting style, what type of things he needed from me, especially covering breaking news. We were already kind of in sync that way. And I think working with him really taught me the value of writing and how to tell a story. And in doing that, I became interested in producing. And that was the next step for me. So I produced weekends. I launched the KTLA Morning News at 6 a.m. on Saturdays. And they figured at the time, you can't mess up that badly. Like, you have no experience with producing, but nobody at the time was watching the weekend. And so if you messed up, who would really know, right? But it was the training grounds for me. And I took that opportunity and I learned from the people who had been in the business for a while, the directors. At the time, Chris Burrows was my anchor. He has passed, but I learned so much from him in terms of like how to also put a show together, how to make it fun, how to still, do really well with breaking news, that kind of thing. And then from there, it was just a shift up from what hours you're producing. So then I went to weekdays, 4 a.m., did that for a few years, and then we kind of had a system where you would move up in hours. So the 4, if the position opens up, the 5, you move up to the 5, then the 6, and all that. For some reason, I just didn't think that worked for me. I was good at the 4. Our ratings had climbed while I was on the 4. And there's a 6 o'clock and a 7 and 8. I knew the 7 and 8 was going to open up pretty soon. And so I fought my way, skipped over the 5, did the 6 for 3 months, and then immediately was moved over to the 7 and 8. And if you don't watch KTLA, the KTLA Morning News at 7 and 8 is the bread and butter of the station. It is what has made history years ago, 30 years ago. And so that was always a dream of mine when I was an intern. It was ingrained in me then that the 7 and 8 pays the bills. That's where you wanted to be. If you wanted to be considered the producer, like the ultimate, that's the show that you needed to produce. So when I got the 7 and 8, I held on. It was a hard thing to prove to these people who have worked there forever that you deserve that spot. So many of them, they were hesitant to give me a shot because I hadn't worked in a different market. I worked my way up, how much could she really know? How much could she really do just working in Los Angeles? Should we give her a shot? And my very first day on the 7 and 8, it was in 2017, and it was the day Representative Scalise was shot at the baseball game, the congressional baseball game, and it happened 15 minutes before my show. And so if they were going to test me, that was it. 15 minutes before my show, I had to change the entire show, go wall-to-wall breaking news on this congressman who was shot that isn't even here. It's in a different state. How do you do it? How do you figure it out? How are you going to all of a sudden produce 2 hours worth of coverage when you had no time to build something? But we got through it. And I think a text message from one of the anchors, she sent me afterwards. She said, for a first day, that could not have gone any better. You were calm, you knew what you were doing, and everybody seemed happy about it, so congratulations. And from that day on, it was just a matter of maintaining that trust and then building it to be better and better and better. And so now, almost 6 years later, I will be producing my last KTLA Morning News at 7 and 8 tomorrow, actually. And then I'm moving on to my manager role as senior producer for the KTLA Morning News. We won this in 2021. I won it as a line producer of the KTLA Morning News at 7 a.m. It is one of 6 that I have at home. But this one is special to me because I came in as an intern and I was always told, okay, the 7-8 is where it's at. And so at the time, the dream was like, I have to produce a 7 a.m. It has to be something that I do before I move on to any station. And so getting this Emmy as part of a team, and with me leading that team, it just is the icing to the cake of the dream that I already achieved. This is kind of a transitional time for me right now, but it is, like I said, this particular Emmy's culmination of that dream that I had as an intern. I get emotional about it. Producing the 7 and 8. Yeah, so, oh my gosh, this is awful. But yeah, it's nice to look back and see all the hard work. Yeah. Anyway, that's all. That's my spiel.
Hi. So, as you mentioned, like you started, you did the internship before you get the job.
Yes.
So how was the process to get the internship? And you did the internship unpaid, so it was unpaid. So how was it? How like the time? What was the time process of the internship? How long was the internship, and what did you learn from that? Because I am here, this is my first time I'm doing this kind of things, so this is my learning process. So so I want to know how can I start doing internship, about your experience, so what you did, so I can learn about those things.
Of course. So back then, I will say back then it was easier to get an internship because it wasn't paid, and so that they could hire as many people as possible. Now they are paid. All the internships are paid, but because of that, now they allocate a budget. Every station allocates a budget, and they can hire as many people. So right out the gate, I want to tell you that. But don't be discouraged. I think every news station here has an internship portion on their website where you could go and you can inquire like how to send in a resume, how to send in an application, all of that. So submit to all of them. That's one thing you should absolutely do. I submitted to KTLA, I think ABC as well, and NBC at the time. KTLA was the first to call me for an internship, and that one happened so quickly, and I watched KTLA as a kid, so that kind of sealed the deal for me that was what I was going to do. And from there, once you get a call, you will get an interview. You will meet with whoever it is, and they'll ask you to, like, which department do you want to work for? Sports, entertainment. Do you want to work the assignment desk? Do you want to work for news? Or some departments have tech. And I chose one that's called segment producing at KTLA. And the segment producers, they only really work for us in the morning because we're news, but we also incorporate a lot of lifestyle, a lot of entertainment, all of that. And I got hired with segment producers. So for that, I learned how to do On Point here, I guess. I never took On Point here, but I learned that at KTLA, how to put together 5-minute, 4.5-minute pieces, just that, to live in one part of the show. You didn't learn how to do the entire thing, just the one part. Putting together, let's say, a cooking segment, the chef, and let's say with your talent, what videos do you use? How do you set up a table? How do you incorporate lighting? What kind of music should you use? Get the mood for it. So those are the type of things that I learned. But while I was doing that, I was also keeping an eye out on other things. Like if breaking news was happening, our segments were getting killed for the day. That means they didn't make air that day. It gets blown out by whatever breaking news is. So I'd make my way to the newsroom and kind of just, do you guys need help? Like, what can I do here? And that was always a way that I made sure to stand out. At the time, there was like 4 interns in my department. And then as a whole, we had maybe 30 interns in the entire station at one time. And so the only way to stand out was to go above and beyond, to do the things that nobody wanted to do, to make sure that people remember your name when you come and go. And that was me. Like if you needed coffee, I was not above it. I would get you coffee. You needed me to drive somewhere, pick something up, I would be the first to volunteer. And that was always I made sure that was what I did there. My favorite story is one day our system crashed. And so basically you had a digital rundown, everything's on a computer, but that rundown, the lines started disappearing before our eyes. So basically the show was doing a disappearing act while we were live on the air. We couldn't get any videos up, we couldn't do anything like that. So the producer called and says, we need someone to go back into the recycling. This is when we used to print out scripts. Somebody to go in the recycling and just start pulling out old scripts from the last hour and hand them to the talent. And so I volunteered. I ran over to the set. I ducked under, just behind. I ducked under. And whatever I could find, I would hand up to the talent. They would just pick it up, read it, go on to the next story, pick it up, read it, go on to the next story. So I was dumpster diving as an intern just to make sure we got air. And it went like that for an hour. With commercial breaks in between, and they'd check on me to make sure that I was okay in commercial breaks. But that was one of the things that still to this day, my bosses then remember about me. They're like, we always knew you were going to make it because you were dumpster diving for us at the time. So things like that. So when you do get an opportunity to be an intern, make yourself stand out. Volunteer for the extra stuff. Find ways to show off your talent. Like if you need something edited, show off your talent that way. If you're really great at writing, sometimes they have kicker stories that producer be like, you want to give it a shot? Sure, go ahead. Let's see your writing. And more often than not, that'll be your foot in the door of another position at that place. So absolutely be sure to do that. These days, like I said, getting an internship is more difficult because of the whole getting paid thing. So network, I would say. Go into LinkedIn and reach out to like the producers at these stations just to connect, say hi, because a lot of the times they'll be the ones to get you in or at least get you the interview. That's what happens at KTLA all the time. When we finally do get an opening, they will say, okay, hey, I know somebody. They might be good at it. If you want to interview them, let me know. And so we will. We'll give anybody a shot, at least the interview process part. So absolutely network as much as you can. That's what LinkedIn is for. So many of us are on there. And it's really easy to track down. In the interview, so let's say you get the interview, the first thing that you should do, even before you step foot into the place, is do your research about the place that you're interning at, whatever station it is. You want to go in there at least pretending like you watch it. So know the talent. Know who's going to be in the show that you're going to be interning for. Know what they're good at, those kind of things, because that does come up. I said in my interview, I remember saying, yeah, I grew up on KTLA, and she thought I was lying about it. And so she's like, oh, yeah, who's your favorite? And I remember saying, I mean, I have a few favorites, but I kind of grew up watching Mark Christie do weather, and I really love Gail Anderson when she's on that soapbox thing and her wig's flying off all over the place. And I was so specific about it that she knew I absolutely wasn't lying. But she's like, that gets people all the time, and you'd be surprised because they come in here pretending like they want to work here, but they've never even seen the product, So be sure to do that as well, because that throws people off more often than I will. And I can say. So, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
So, what's some advice that you would give your younger self?
For me, it's actually to slow down a little bit. The moment I graduated high school, I knew what I needed to do. From first generation immigrant, I'm fourth in line in my family, but they were already looking to me at the time to be something, do something, contribute to the family in some way, somehow. And so being in college for more than 4 years was not an option for me. I was interning, but also doing like 18 units at the same time, juggling everything. And a part of me wishes that maybe I had taken some time to breathe a little. I got hired right out of college and then worked every day since. And before I knew it, my 20s had flown by, and I'm now just learning that maybe I should have slowed down. Maybe I should have had a little bit more balance. Obviously, I don't regret it because of where I am. But if I could, it would be to apply less pressure on myself and cut myself some slack, because I made mistakes then too. And I think I was hard on myself for a really long time as well. But ultimately, everything works out. Whatever your path is meant to do, it will be. So, yeah, that's probably it.
Hi.
Hi.
So I know you already interned at KTLA and everything, so you were already a bit comfortable there, but what was the transition like going from college straight to a big market like KTLA? Was it difficult? How did you get used to it?
Sure. It was actually still pretty scary because that wasn't in my department. It was lighter in segment producing, and then all of a sudden you move, basically it was on the other side of the wall, which is where the newsroom was. And it was hard, I want to say, because all of a sudden you were forced to kind of do the newsy things and try to figure out the mood of the place and how best to handle all the personalities in a newsroom. There's so many writers there, and at the time the talent were mixed in the room as well. So navigating a lot of that, I had to break out of my shell. I was very shy. Even when I went here, I was very shy. So breaking out of my shell to really be comfortable enough to ask questions and comfortable enough to learn from people who had been there for 20 years, that was a real learning curve for me too. But just also getting into the flow of what news is, how to better learn the brand of KTLA. That was something that I had to get used to. And knowing my place, I guess, because of course I wanted to be something there, but also realizing like I am the bottom of the totem pole right now. How much is my say actually worth? And after a while I thought maybe it's not worth very much. But then the more that people around me supported my ideas and all of that, I realized, I'm actually an equal member of this newsroom. My voice matters. People want to know what I have to say because I'm a viewer too. And I think a lot of the perspective that I was giving at the time was the perspective of a viewer, somebody watching at home. And that's who we're trying to reach anyway, every day.
I wanted to duly note something. You said that one of your first really big stories was the royal wedding, and that you stated that you grew up on KTLA 5. And I just found it really funny because I was in 4th grade whenever that happened, and you really made things come full circle because I was that little girl watching KTLA 5, and you made another one of us being able to look to KTLA 5 and be like, oh, I want to do that. So you produced that show. Sam Rubin was my favorite,
Yes.
hands down. Every mom loves him, and I love him too. My mom loves him as well. Sorry, I talk a lot.
It's okay.
Poor Lincoln. I'm just like excited to talk to you. Whenever you were talking about everything crashing down with breaking news 15 minutes before your first show, and you're like, well, how do you do that? How did you do that? Especially with how you found out that breaking news, I feel like I'd just be like, do, we're gonna go on with the show, and then finding out after the fact. How did you deal with that?
So, thank you. That was you made me feel very old, but at the same time, very honored with that. So that day, every news station, especially in a big market, you have resources available to you. So we are affiliated with CNN. Well, at least at the time we were affiliated with CNN. They all had already sent, the nearest crew had live pictures. So a lot of that was just talking over the live picture, at least for the first 30 minutes, since we weren't getting very much information. All you can do is really talk what you're seeing. Talk about what you're seeing. That is the very basic principle of journalism, right? Tell us what you're seeing. Describe it for the people at home. So I'm fortunate enough to have incredible talent working as my anchors, Frank Buckley, Jessica Holmes, and I think at the time it was Michaela Pereira. And all you had to do was give them the live pictures. Let them know, hey, this is what we have. The live picture from this location. And then at the same time, I had interns bring them out. Here's what we know. They also have computers too. And I would send them messages of like, here's the latest update from police. And they would read that from the screen, and they're able to do that because we have the live pictures over, and they could look down and, I would message them, here's the latest, here's what the desk is hearing. Okay, now we're hearing they're adding a helicopter shot. We'll have that. And the moment you pull it up, we'll have that. At the same time, you're telling the desk, find me someone that I could talk to on the phone. So they're working on that. The moment they're able to get some kind of expert on, you let them know, okay, hey, so we have this person. He is aware of the situation, and he'll give us the latest. And these are just the kind of things that you have to think about. So while they're doing that interview with this expert, you're thinking, okay, where can I go next? The next thing is our affiliate there now has a reporter who can go live. All right, can they be ready in 2 minutes? Yes. Okay, stretch this phoner for another 2 minutes because we need to get this reporter up and ready. So as soon as that's done, you tell them, okay, reporter's ready. You bring the reporter in live from wherever. All you have to do is give them the names. Like I said, if you work with pros, they already know. You just have to give them who, where, and what angle they're at or covering from. And then from there, a lot of it is a talk back. Like that reporter will do their job. If my talent, they have questions, they'll ask it. And at that point, you're hoping, okay, we have nowhere to go. We're going back to live pictures. They'll again talk for however long until I have something else for them. You're also deciding, should I kill commercial breaks? Is it big enough to do that? And I think at the time it was, and we all hands on deck at that point. We had writers downloading video that was coming in from people who were sending it, or downloading stuff that was coming down from CNN, because CNN was also at the time interviewing people. And because we were affiliated with them, we could just turn around sound bites of people who witnessed the scene. And every time that they would file something new, they'd let me know, got a woman saying that she saw it happen. So then I would just have to get in their ear. We have a tape ready to go of this woman who's about to witness it. And then they'll toss to it almost identically how you told them it would go. And then they would just react to it after that soundbite, right? So those are the things. You constantly have to think about what resources do I have available to me. And when you're at a station for a while, you'll know. For us today, we didn't have a reporter at the Grapevine. And some of us were like, we're missing out on something. I said, okay, no problem. We have a Bakersfield station. Let's go see if they actually sent somebody. Sure enough, they did. And so all of a sudden we went from having no reporter there to having a live shot from someone in Bakersfield who got their shot at being in Los Angeles TV. Probably more viewers than they normally get, but they got that break because they decided, you know what, hey, I'll go on TV for you, because we had resources. So yeah, you'll learn a lot of these things, what resources you have, the PIOs that you have that you can immediately call for things like that, for breaking news especially. So yeah. That's it. It's just knowing your resources.
I have one more question. I've asked this to Pedro. I've asked this to Carlos. I've asked this to Jose Duran. They've all said really good things, and I've taken them very closely to heart. And I believe that this is something I'm going to definitely struggle with. How do you not take it home with you? How do you not take these incredible stories home with you? I mean, from deaths in the family to car crashes to breaking news to Turkey being crumbled down to the ground because of earthquakes. How do you keep that at work and take Claudine home?
The pandemic made it really hard. 2020 was a doozy. There was the COVID happening, there was protests happening, we had wildfires, and it just got to a point where even I thought, I got to get out. Like, this is too much. This is all very heavy. And I remember Sandy Hook. I was working at the time when it broke. For 1 hour, I felt like a robot, just putting in videos, putting in stories, whatever we could to get air until our relief came. And I remember that day being particularly hard. The moment they're like, okay, you guys can go, the second round of people are here, I remember going into my car and just crying. And it felt like it didn't register until I sat in my car and I was in that silence, what just had happened, because I was so just worried about getting something on air at the time. And how you don't take it home with you is you don't make it about yourself. You're telling the story, but you're not the story. You have to remember the people that it actually affected and the people who were there. And the moment that you get that perspective, it changes for you. It makes you feel less sorry for yourself. You feel sorry for the situation that happened. Your heart reaches out to them, all of that. You do your job to help them tell their stories. I think that is catharsis in itself, because you're getting these people to be remembered. You're getting their stories remembered. You're getting them the help that they need oftentimes. So all of that, it makes you feel like, okay, this is a job. We talk about people dying, but nobody actually, is dying. We're not operating on anybody. That's not our job. Our job is to tell stories. And so the moment that you can wrap your head around that and then go back to being supported by family, I think that's really important. Have a good support system, family, with friends. Remember that even as devastation is happening, even as things are going on in the world, remind yourself to laugh, remind yourself to have fun. That's part of life. You are almost obligated to enjoy your life as much as possible. Because if you don't and you just keep carrying this weight, it's not worth it. What is it all for? It's not. It's the moments that bring us joy. That's what life is about. Everything else kind of is just the tragedy parts that make a comedy, that kind of thing. And so I don't know if that's that helpful, but to me, that's how I am able to carry on. Just knowing that it's a public service that we're doing. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Speaking of enjoying life, how do you manage your work life and your personal life?
So that is very difficult. With my weird schedules, I've always worked overnights at KTLA. When I used to produce the 4, I would have to come in 10:30 the night before, and then I would be done with the 4 at 5. I'd stick around for half an hour, so I'd be going back to sleep 6 a.m. Right now, it's like I wake up at 1 a.m. to watch what happened, the news the night before. just see what I missed while I was sleeping, and kind of get my day going throughout the day. So it's very difficult, especially when you're working overnights. It is rough on your body. It is rough on your mental health, all of that. I will say, though, the overnight news crew is the most fun because of that. I think we all are a little bit twisted in some kind of way. We're a dysfunctional type of family. We all know how to laugh, and I think that's what makes the environment so light, especially at KTLA. I know other people who say that they've never been in a newsroom like ours before, and I think it's because we cultivate this kind of like, listen, we get it. Overnights are not great, but we're here, and if we're going to suffer together, we might as well make it a little bit fun. Let's get the work done, but let's make it fun. And in that case, we've become friends. So a lot of my friends, my very closest friends, all work at the station. We will make time with each other. Let's go to lunch afterwards. Or if it's a Friday, we all know we're not working this weekend. Let's all go out for drinks. So it is possible to do it. I think personally, you have to prioritize what's important to you. So yes, of course, you have to go to work. You got to get paid somehow, right? But also prioritize, hey, I'm going to sacrifice a little sleep tonight because I want to go see friends. I need that for my mental health. Do that. After a while working weekends, I put my foot down at work and I said, I need my weekends back because that is the only time that I can see my family, that I can see friends without feeling like I have to sleep early and wake up early. So eventually you will have the opportunity to be able to fight for your hours as well, at least some flexibility. And dating, not great, but that's probably just because it's Los Angeles. So you can't really fault that. But like I said, you will learn to prioritize what's important. And if something really is, you want to do something, do it. You know, you could sleep when you're dead, what I say.
So when you started here, like at Valley View, what did you want to do first? Like when you first came into this class, like did you want to be an anchor or reporter, or did you just want to become a producer?
So actually at COC, they also have a really good broadcast journalism program, and that's where I started as an anchor and reporter. We got to do some election coverage. I remember I was covering Democratic headquarters the night President Obama, then President-elect Obama, won his first term. And I remember covering that, and everything went great and all of that. But gosh, I hated seeing myself on TV. I just hated it. I could do it, and I could present what I needed to, get my thoughts together, all of that. But seeing myself on TV, I was so self-conscious, and I just knew that there was somebody else could do it better. You know, I could put it together, and I prefer somebody else to just present it for me. That's kind of how I've always been, though. Group projects, let me do the whole thing, but make somebody else actually stand in front of the class and say they're, the big part of it. But it wasn't until I got here that I really started to dip my foot in producing. And I think that year we were short, our rotation was short, and I ended up producing twice just because I loved it.
For Lizette Gomez and Fatima Zalkifli, I'm Nick Robles.
And I'm Jocelyn Bonilla. Thank you for watching.
I like the freedom of putting a show together, deciding which stories go in there, how the stories are told. Do I want it a VO? Do I have VOSOT? Do I think that needs to be a package? I love that creativity, that freedom, without having to worry about, oh God, how do I look on TV? Or, oh God, I hate the sound of my voice, those kind of things. So producing, and then when I went to KTLA and interned as a segment producer, that kind of sealed the deal for me. I said, behind the scenes all the way. There's no way I could end up behind the desk or in front of a camera. I just can't do it. Yeah.
You've inspired me to also become a producer too.
Oh, yes. It's a lot of fun, and the power is great. Especially, like I said, I watched KTLA growing up, so like Mark and Sam, I grew up on those guys. So being able to tell them, like, hey, you need to stick to 2 minutes or we're out, that's still to this day, I can't believe it. Making calls. And I remember one time my goddaughter, she came and visited me one day, and she was watching from behind the scenes, and we had BTS on that day. It was very big. That's why she came to visit me, not because she wanted to see me. But we had BTS on that day, and they were teaching Sam how to do a dance move. And gosh, I love Sam, but he's an awful dancer. And because it was my show, at the very end, I said, Sam, keep dancing. We're going to go to break. You're still dancing. And the poor man had to bust a move again, and it was awful. It went viral. But to do that, and my niece watching me, and she said, I can't believe you just got him to dance like a puppet. And I said, well, that's kind of your job as a producer. You know what a good TV moment is, and you help foster that and bring it to life. And so there is something to be said about, being a producer. It's rock star.
Is the 838 stretch real?
The 838 stretch is real.
And everybody does it?
Yes, for the most part. They do. Because, again, the weekend, they've also become their own kind of family. Like, when you're moved to that shift or when you're hired onto that shift, one of the things they tell you is, hey, guess what? You're likely going to be on TV in some kind of capacity. So the 838 stretch, it's evolved, obviously, from back when Chris Burrows decided to do it one day into, like, this whole big monster. Now we get crews to do the stretch out in the field. If there's someone famous, we have them shoot an 838 stretch because people at home love it. They can connect with it, and actually they stick around because of it. So it does help. It is real. And it is something that we sometimes pre-produce. So it's not always live, but yeah, we do absolutely do it.
So my question is, as you might have heard, that I do want to be a producer. Mm-hmm. Is there any certain traits that you share in common with other producers? I know that sometimes I've heard that from people that are like, oh, you have what it takes, but they never really could explain what is it that makes a producer. So have you seen any traits that you kind of could relate with your coworkers or other producers?
Yes. First of all, what kind of producer do you want to be? Segment or
So I'm actually I'm going to digital. So I would like to be a digital producer. It's a little different. But yeah.
So that one you're creating basically your own product and posting that online, right? Well, first of all, being a producer, all producers have to have some kind of really good news judgment. You got to know what is a story and what isn't. It could be funny. It could be any of that. It could be something that just went viral, that's trending. It doesn't necessarily have to be so hard and breaking news all the time. But just have good news judgment. What do people care about? That's the main thing. Have a sense of where you're working, because every station is different. Your brand is different at the station you're working at. What do they value? What do they deem important? What do their viewers deem important? What kind of viewers do you have? Or is it more older viewers? Do you have younger viewers? So all of that factors into making a good producer if you know what that is. Because then that'll determine what kind of stories you put in. That will determine, how light your show should be or how heavy your show should be, right? Because if you don't know those things, you're building a show that only you're going to watch. You're only putting stories that you care about. That's not the thing. What you're doing as a producer, especially a show producer, you're trying to determine the things that people care about and get them to stay to watch for the entire hour, because it's everything that they could relate to, or at least most of it they could relate to. As a producer, you need to be able to work best under pressure. A lot of this is we're all on deadline all the time. In live news, at least for me, in live news, this thing, as soon as 7 o'clock hits, the show is in my hands. Everything that happens in those 2 hours, 2-hour stretch, that's all on you. Any mistake, you can blame a writer for messing something up. You can blame the editor for messing up a video. Ultimately, it comes down on you because you let that air. So that's something that you need to know. And also, I say the most important thing about being a producer and the trait of a good producer is writing really well. Be able to write, because in breaking news, most of the time you'll have to write it. You can produce anything if you write. I think you can direct a reporter on how to tell their stories if you know how to write. And you can help your anchors better understand a story if they're not really understanding, like, I don't really get the story or why we're running and all of that. you can explain to them, like, hey, this is why we're doing this story. This is what people are saying about this story. Another thing is doing your research when you're a producer. You know, a lot of that, you have writers, sure, and all of that, but if you're not reading that story first that they're trying to digest and trying to break down, why do you even have it in your show? You know, a lot of it you have to, your talent will have a lot of questions for you sometimes, and you have to be able to answer them kind of right away because they're about to read a story in 30 seconds. And if you can't give them a quick answer or do a quick Google search just to at least confirm what you think it is, then you're pretty much useless in that seat too, and you lose their trust. And the foundation of especially a really good 2 hours or hour show is having the trust of your team. And so they put a lot of that on your shoulders. What else? I think, yeah, that's the basic principles. It's news judgment, writing, and working under pressure.
Okay. I have one more question.
Sure.
And how forgiving would you say your profession is? I mean, everyone makes mistakes, but I feel like we kind of have like this notion that in this job you just can't mess up. Could you maybe talk about a time where you've had an error or something, or where you've caught a mistake and you kind of how that goes?
Yeah. So first things first, it's not that serious. Like, let me just tell you right now, especially in a live news situation, you will learn very quickly that it's not that serious. Unless you're like, you killed somebody off on the script because you didn't read it properly, or the story that you messed up is somehow related to a sales thing that your station has, because then that is, you know, people will get mad, money will be lost, that kind of thing if you mess up like a sales related type segment. So those are the kind of things. But for the most part, I mean, gosh, if you watch our news, there are so many mistakes left and right. A lot of it you can't control. You do your best and you try your best to at least make sure that everything is accurate. I think that's the most important thing. Always read the scripts that's running. Try to get ahead of them. Try even before your talent is in there reading it for themselves. The moment that you can become, at least the script part is accurate, all the other, you know, oh man, they accidentally turned off the light on the weather guy as he's doing his report. To be honest with you, people at home think it's hilarious. And they like to watch a train wreck sometimes. And so don't stress about it, I want to say. I do beat myself up over like a factual error because our whole job is based on fact and it's our job to report the news. But I don't think that I've ever actually made such a grave mistake that I went home and, you know, was so depressed over it. It just is one of those things that people in the industry will tell you, like, just try again tomorrow. You know, you forget about it. You leave everything at work at the end of the day. That's what's really great. The moment that I leave work, at least for an extended block, I don't think about it until tonight when I go home and I'll read my emails and kind of start prepping for tomorrow. But for the most part, you can leave it all there.
I'm sure in this industry you've met a lot of exciting people, but who would you say has been the most memorable for you?
The most memorable, okay, so full disclaimer, KTLA Morning News, we have a lot of talent on, especially pre-pandemic. They used to come in every day. We would have about 3 a day, I want to say. So I met a lot of people, basically, because of that, especially as an intern. A lot of the times it was my job to like open the door for them and walk them to the green room. But probably the most memorable are the bigger stars that you wouldn't think are memorable. So like Tom Hanks, he would come in by himself, no entourage, no paparazzi, anything like that. He'd just come in, get a paper cup, fill it with whatever coffee we had, even though it's not great coffee. And he just kind of sit to himself like he's a regular guy. So he's very lovely. Also watches KTLA too, which is a bonus. But people like that, Snoop Dogg is also very generous with his time. He will stand there and take pictures with everybody if he were asked to. So he's another really great guy. I've also had the opportunity to, do other KTLA type things where we have met people. Like today we went to go see Michael B. Jordan getting his star on the Walk of Fame, random things like that. But memorable in that you realize, oh wow, these big stars, as big as they are, they're actually really nice, and they're actually relatable and all of that. And then after a while, at least for me, working at KTLA for 13, almost 14 years now, the shine has kind of gone away, and there's very few people that I still get starstruck with. So there is that. It does go away. But yeah, I would say those are my picks. And probably Shaq too, because just he's lovely. Just the biggest teddy bear ever. But yeah.
What are your future goals?
So right now I am transitioning as a manager, senior producer, and I've kind of been tasked with doing, I guess, bringing us back to pre-pandemic, how it was back then. During the pandemic, we were hit hard. I mean, we had our staff became smaller. We had more shows to cover as well. So they launched shows, but we were losing staff. So it's a very short staff newsroom. Especially in 2020, 2021, you weren't sure, could we have fun again on TV? You know, especially since we're socially distanced and all of that. And at sometimes we were like, you had to do entertainment from a different room because you could only have 3 people max in the studio. And so those are the things that we were dealing with during the pandemic. And now we're trying to transition back to pre-pandemic life, bringing back the fun, bringing back, you know, what the KTLA DNA is, what makes us who we are is, you know, that we can cover breaking news, you know, as well as anybody else, but we'll give you the personalities too that you love and that you've been following since you were a kid. So that's one of the jobs that I have. Another big task that I have given myself is to be a better mentor. We have a lot of new and young writers, producers. The newsroom is getting younger and younger. I remember being the youngest in the room, like at 19. That is not, I'm no longer that. But we do have a lot of young 20-year-olds, you know, 23, 24. And they all kind of got their break because they proved themselves. When one of our writers now, Andre, he was working as a traffic producer about a year ago. And he was there because that was the internship that was available at the time, and he took it because he wants to be a reporter. But I didn't know that about him. It wasn't until, like, you know, people would show him around, like, yeah, so this is what I do, and this is how you edit. And I was like, what are you guys doing? And I was like, Andre, aren't you supposed to be going home? And he said, oh, well, I wanted to learn stuff, you know, kind of how the newsroom works. And that reminded me of what I used to be. And so we had a discussion. I said, okay, well, what is it that you want to do? I want to be a reporter. I said, okay, well, what are you doing as a traffic producer? You should be here in the newsroom with us. And I said, how's your writing? And he was like, I think I'm okay. I said, okay, bring me some of your samples. We'll work on your stuff. If you're already good and, you know, I see you have potential, I'll work with you on it. So both of us on our spare time, he'd write me 3 pieces. I'd go over them with him and say, change this up. Here's how you should be handling the story, you know, thinking about the story. And we did that for 2 weeks. And he listened. He took, you know, all my notes to heart. And by the end of the 2nd week, I said, okay, you're ready for a writing test. Let's go. So I got him that writing test for him with our assistant news director. She does all of our writing tests. And she called me later that afternoon and said, you were right. He's great. This kid's 22 at the time. And 2 weeks later, he was out of traffic and writing for a number 2 market. That rarely happens. But that's the kind of thing that I want to do at KTLA is foster the younger producers and the younger talent that we have, because I know what it's like to be the young talent, and invest in that. Because that ultimately, that's how we are going to be stronger as a station. You know, people who are raised on the brand or raised on the DNA of KTLA and still know how to tell, you know, the story as good as anybody else, as the veteran in the room. So yeah, that's one of the things, and I'm pushing to bring back our internship full force. That's another thing that I want to do. But short term, kind of figuring out what a manager is, and I would say that long term, I don't know. I think eventually I will get out of news. Probably still do some kind of live producing type element, maybe like a talk show, Who knows? But because this position is relatively new and I'm under a 2-year contract, I'm sitting comfortable for 2 years. Yeah.
So obviously the newsroom is changing now, much more digital, like you said, more people coming in. Do you have any insight on where you see the newsroom going in the next couple of years when we're all, fully in the newsroom? Do you see it being more digital? Do you see, being more computerized? I mean, some people are afraid that the AI is going to take our jobs. What do you see the future of news being?
So for a while, AI has kind of been around for a while. I will say that because, a lot of the feeds that come in, they're all AI. LA Times, every time they have a story on the latest earthquake that just struck, that's AI. That is a bot, their LA Times bot, earthquake bot, that puts that kind of story out. So that's been happening. Do I think that it's going to completely take over? I don't think so. Every newsroom will change in that the technology does hopefully get better. A lot of stations are transitioning to just robocams. So, setting this up, all of that, it's a press of a button now. I've seen newsrooms where the producer is essentially the director, the camera person, all of that, because all they're doing, it's just one person in a booth, and you are pressing buttons, and everything in the rundown is coded in a way that basically it's all kind of just its own dance. So that is where technology comes into play. Digital, yes, our digital is expanding, and I think that is, of course, going to be a presence moving forward. Every station right now is trying to figure out how to better navigate streaming. So many people watch us on various platforms these days. We have our own KTLA Plus app on Roku. You could watch us on Hulu. You could watch us on KTLA.com. You can watch us on our app. It's everywhere. The problem with it now is how we used to rate everything, who's watching on all of that. That all used to be done just by Nielsen rating. That's how you can tell if you beat another station, if you have more ratings, all of that. Well, now with these different platforms popping up, they don't count those because they're not technically TV, right? So now you're trying to figure out, okay, am I actually beating the competition or is the competition actually beating me, or is it just because we're now moving towards streaming and more people are watching us and all that? So it's harder to gauge now. So now it's even a transition from Nielsen to something called impressions. And impressions, they factor in, at least as best as they could, all the streaming. But now our numbers are weird, and everybody's numbers are weird because now we're transitioning into something different. And sometimes that causes panic because, oh my God, our numbers are down, but really it's not. So that does affect it. And ultimately, though, and I've had this discussion actually with Sam, with Frank, and with Mark, that we don't think that broadcast TV is actually going to go anywhere. There's always going to be a need for someone to be in front of the camera. There's always going to be a need for somebody to put the show together. No matter what direction you're trying to go, digital or not, you are going to be needed some way, shape, or form. And I think that's kind of, people like the stability, especially of local TV, something that they could turn on every morning that's part of their routine. And so I don't think anyone's touching that for a while.
And you also said you love breaking news. That's your bread and butter.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any specific news stories that you really, really like to cover? My favorite is politics. Okay. I'm all about politics. But what's kind of your favorite stories?
So I don't necessarily want to say that I have a favorite story. I think what makes a good show is you got a little bit of everything. So in that regard, I do like to build a show that I think my viewers care about. So in the morning, what do they care about? They care about what's my weather going to be like? What's my commute to work going to be like? And then the other things that people like is like stories that tell them how the government is messing with their money. So like inflation, you throw that in. Is there crime happening in my neighborhood? Do I need to be, aware of something? So you put that in. Transportation pieces, people like. Right now, homelessness is something people care about. And so you have to constantly gauge what do people care about these days. And that's how you determine what goes into your show. Breaking news is so different in that you are going to be committed to one topic, sometimes for 5 minutes, sometimes for 10, sometimes for the entire hour. The last few days, these series of storms, I'm so over it at this point because we are in day 7 or 8 of essentially different stories but the same story. You've already have your formula of how you're going to tell the story, and I don't like that in that sense because it's like, I have to do the stories that I have to do, but I don't get the creative freedom of adding other stories that I think people care about. But yeah, breaking news is that's my favorite. I don't think there's a certain topic. I think it's the type. Breaking news, absolutely, hands down. And I've covered a lot of different breaking news. I've covered wildfires, the days where fires were coming all around us at one point. There was like 4 or 5 fires burning. I remember being in the booth for all of that for, a week. Protests that were going on, I was there. Unfortunately, I've also been in the booth to cover mass shootings at times. I live in Valencia, and the Saga school shooting happened 3 blocks from my house. And at the time when that was happening, I didn't realize that it was real because they're like, we're hearing of a shooting at Saugus High School. And I said, wait, what? That's right there at my house. And I remember that was one of the few times that I was actually frozen to do breaking news just because it was so close to home. And about 10 minutes after learning it, we got it on the air. We weren't sure what was happening. 10 minutes later, the 8 o'clock had started, and our helicopter went over to this elementary school. And they thought that at the time that the shooter might have been hiding near the elementary school. Well, my nephew is in that building. And what do you do? How do you detach yourself from personal life and manage to still do your job? So I let them know, okay, this is what Sky 5 is doing. And I knew our traffic helicopter at the time, Marcono, I knew that he could at least speak uninterrupted for about 2 minutes. So I had them toss him and describe what's going on. In that 2 minutes, I pulled away from my seat. I took deep breaths, and then I remembered that I have an obligation to also protect the people of that community. Get them what they need to know, let them know that their kids are going to be okay, and you pull yourself together. And so by the time he was done, I'd pulled myself back onto my desk, and we told what people needed to know. And not only did I finish out my hour, I was actually asked to stay on for the next 2 hours. So I was breaking news coverage for 3.5 hours at that time. No breaks, no restroom breaks, nothing like that. And no one in the room knew internally what I had been dealing with, because I knew I was there for a job. My family, I sent them a quick text letting them know what was going on, told everybody to stay inside, don't come out, all of that. The moment everybody texted me back that they were okay, I knew that I could keep going. And that's it. And it goes back to, realizing it's not about you, that you have a bigger obligation to the public, when you're doing your job. So those are sad days. They are. But they're also really gratifying because it's a testament to a job well done, that you did what you had to do.
And then one last question.
Sure,
Sorry,
no
I'm
problem.
just keep asking him.
I love it.
So, do you have any tips for soon-to-be reporters and anchors to make a producer's life easier? Help us help you.
Okay. Yes. So there's some qualities of a great producer that I love. So we are on from 4 to 11. At least that's the part that I am in charge of, 4 to 11. And every hour, I love a reporter who tries to change it up every hour. It's so easy to go out there, write one script, and do that script over and over again. But if you are the type to say, okay, 1 hour we'll do this, next hour let me change up my soundbite, different perspective, and you get that on air the next hour, even that smallest little thing, I'll be impressed. But if you go a step further and say, okay, let's say you're on SoCal Gas is raising prices again next year. You give the story, the basic story 1 hour because you're trying to get something on the air. But next hour, if you go to a restaurant and you talk to the owner and you get them to tell you why this increase is going to hurt them as much as it is, that's even better for me. And then the next hour you talk to another business, hear their perspective. That to me is a great reporter because you're not lazy. You're going out, you're telling the different perspectives of what's going on, how it's impacting more than one person. So that's something I will say for writers, because in a large market, you have a writer to at least put your elements in, to write your toss for you, get your graphics up, all of that. They prefer a reporter who can make decisions. There are some who are a bit scatterbrained, or that they're not really confident in how they're telling the story, so they'll change up elements on you last minute. And that will really anger some people because, they also have a deadline. You have a deadline. The systems that you work with, sometimes they're not instantaneous. So you'll put video into the system, and it'll take maybe 4 minutes for it to actually load all the way through and make air. And so you have to be conscientious of those things too. You can't just be feeding in sound bites to turn last minute. So that's something. Know your story when you're out there. I will tell you that there have been times where the reporter went out there, they didn't even know what city they were in. So at least know that. Know what city you're in. So yeah, those are probably the main things. And then, be aware of your surroundings while you're out there. You're covering a story and something else is going on behind you and you think that's newsworthy, let me know. And we can change up your story and you can cover that. I remember one time, Eric Spellman, he was out there. I forget what story he's doing, but he goes, hey, so this car just crashed into a fire hydrant. Want me to switch over to that because now it's blocking a whole intersection. I said, great. 20 minutes later, he was doing that. He walked a block away, covered that for us, and then when that was cleaned up, he went back to his original story. That's the type of thing that I like is, you're giving us a reason to put you on air. Sure, you have to be there, especially since you eat up time, but actually sell it to us. Sell us your story. Make us believe that you are something we can lead with. So I'll say that. As an anchor, there's so much, but I would say that the qualities of being a really solid anchor is they're so well read. They know a little bit about everything. They're constantly in the know about everything. And that's what makes a really good producer or anchor. I always say that most of the time they're sitting there, they're reading a script, but where they really make their money is those breaking news situations. There's no script happening in those cases. A lot of the time it's just what I tell them, what information I give them in their ear. But everything is off the cuff. So, the more that you are well read, the more that you understand how things work, the more beneficial you will be as an anchor. Working in news is not easy. It's hard. We've talked about the mental toll, the emotional toll that it can have on you. So once you're there, wherever you are, wherever you end up, really get a feel for the place, really get a feel for the job, and answer within, hopefully, a short amount of time whether or not this is really for you. It's not for everyone. I've seen people get burned out from this job. I've seen them wash out from the job. It's really not for everyone. But if you feel in your heart that this is where you want to be, keep at it, because it will be rewarding for you no matter what. It's what's great about news, especially broadcast journalism, live TV, every day is the same, but it's different. Different stories are being told. Different things can go wrong. Different things can go right, really right. And as long as you have conviction in what you do and in your story as well, I think you can make it far. That's kind of how I got my start. I just believed in myself. I surrounded myself with a support system that also made me believe in myself. I use my education here to get me to, you know, certain positions, especially at KTLA, you know, get me where I wasn't supposed to be, but I made sure that I stayed there because I could. So trust in your skills, trust in yourself, trust in who you are. You know, I think a lot of what makes me a good producer, I think, and that's not to toot my own horn, but I think what makes me a solid producer is because I put so much of myself in my show, and not in the cliche, like, you know, I like Instagram, so I'm going to do stories on Instagram every day. No, I mean, I'm a woman. I am a first-generation immigrant. I'm Filipino American. I am in my 30s. You know, everything that makes you who you are, dig down deep, and those are going to be the types of stories that people care about. Because, you know, the weird quirks of us, okay, yeah, those are great, makes for good kickers, but ultimately it's the thing that makes us relatable, the fact that being a woman, being a person of color, all of those things. If you know what that is, and if you know who you are and what people like you are, makes you relatable, that's how you know what kind of stories to put on. Those are the type of stories you know what to cover. You know, I'm a woman, so I care about reproductive health. I care about, you know, will I make money for my family? You know, those type of stories. So you put those kind of stories in. I'm a person of color, so you do these stories about racism, you know, still in our schools these days. Shine a light on that. I grew up poor. Shine a light on homelessness and what is being done to combat it. So if you can tap into those things, I mean, you're the viewer too. So I think that'll help you really be able to not just tell your story, but also determine what is newsworthy, especially in LA. And that said, going back to LA, wherever you end up, learn about the city. If you stay in LA, great, because you grew up here. You know what it's like. Whatever city you end up in, could be Colorado Springs, you know, learn about it before you even step foot in that newsroom. Take a tour of the place. Get to know the cities, the counties that you cover, all of that, because all of that is also going to factor into what goes into your show. You know, the more you know about the city, the more you're kind of part of the city, you understand what people really care about. So I would say that, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Just absolutely believe in yourself, plain and simple. You can do anything your mind, or you can do anything you put your mind to, and as cliche as that sounds, that's how I got here. I had a dream, and I went after it. That's it. Yay. Oh, I'm sorry. I've been awake since 1, so my brain isn't really working.